well as to provide kind words to the facilitator for all of their hard work. This will also be used for the facilitators and the RCD's reporting. By filling out the survey, this also ensures that you receive a certificate of attendance via our RCD management system. I'd like to take a minute and just introduce Professor Chinaza Olenya. Prof. Chinaza is an educationist, researcher, and associate professor in the Department of Education, Leadership and Management at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. He completed his doctoral degree program in the Department of Social Sciences Education at the University of Zululand, South Africa in May 2018. In quest for becoming a better researcher, he embarked on postdoctoral research fellowship in the Department of Business Management, University of South Africa, after serving a 2-year term as postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Education, Leadership and Management at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Previously, Prof. Chinaza had his honors and master's degree in English education and sociology of education, respectively from Lagos State University, Lagos, Nigeria. His doctoral thesis focused on learning challenges amongst undergraduate students in selected rural universities in South Africa and Nigeria. Prof. Chinaza has presented papers in both local and international conferences, as well as seminars and workshops. In 2018, he emerged as one of the winners of the Emerging Scholar Awards from Common Ground Research Network and a scholarship from South African Association for Institutional Research. In 2019, as a postdoctoral fellow, he received an award of excellence from the University of Johannesburg for his research output. Likewise, in 2020, he received an award for his research output from the University of Zululand as a researcher. As a researcher, Prof. Chinaza holds collaboration with high regards. This has led him to collaborating with scholars from different fields of endeavor within and outside of South Africa, as well as the continent. One of his collaborations has led to a successful completion of a global research involving over 90 nations from 6 continents of the world. He currently sits on the editorial board of different journals, some of which are Journal of Educational Studies South Africa, Journal of Education and E-Learning Research. He is an associate editor of Reading and Writing Journal and an academic editor of the following journals: Sage Open and the PLOS One. Prof. Chinaza has supervised both honors, masters, and doctoral students to completion and examined thesis and dissertations from different universities. He is currently a board member of the International Society Exploring Teaching and Learning, based in the United States. So without further ado, I hand you over to Prof. Chinaza. Prof. Chinaza, thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to an insightful presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Doc, for that, for the introduction. And thank you for inviting me as well. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining this meeting. Believe me, if you are not here, I don't think this would be what it is or be like whatever it will end up becoming. However, this is something that is quite new to our faculty, to the Faculty of Education, if I may be precise. I don't know those joining us from other faculties, but I know this is something new to our faculty, and I know many are out there to look out for what it holds or what it entails or what it looks like being a non-assessing chair of a VIVA. Well, we'll look at this and go through this journey together. And please, like the moderator said, please feel free at any point if you have any question to ask. Feel free to ask your question. Feel free to engage. It's all about brainstorming, all about getting the best to see how we can become the best. And of course, UJ wants to be the best, and we will be the best. All right. Okay, allow me share my screen. And then we'll go through this journey together. If you can see my screen, please just give me a sign just before I put on slide mode.
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Okay, so I'll just put on slide mode now, and then we can move on. Okay. All right, so I just decided to put this as chairing a VIVA session. Some choose to call it VIVA, some choose to call it VIVA, whatever you want. But the most important thing is that you know you want to share something. And maybe we should start by asking a question here. What's the reason behind the VIVA? Why do we need to have the Viva? Unfortunately, I couldn't lay my hand on the video I wanted to share, a funny video of a young man who finished his, I think one of those jokes, comedy anyway, not a true life experience, I doubt, of a young man who finished his thesis, submitted, and was asked to do a summary or report his thesis in maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And the guy was busy saying different things, speaking things that they could not comprehend, the listeners could not comprehend. It was quite funny. And in the end, it was obvious that he didn't write the thesis himself. Um, I've, I've had my students present in their first doctoral seminars before, and I hear colleagues say things like, "Oh, you did well. Thank you for presenting for the presentation. It's obvious that Prof. Chinaza didn't write this or is not writing this for you." So apparently, when we talk about the Viva, it's a sign. It gives us an insight to say that so many things are happening out there. So many things, including having firms. You'd be surprised that there are firms that write thesis or dissertation for people, and somebody gets a complete thesis, submits it somewhere, and goes ahead to get the qualification, whereas he or she has not done anything or justice to the topic and knows nothing about it. And so the reason behind the Viva, or the reason behind the need for the Viva, is to have students come around, share their knowledge, share their experiences, share their findings from their thesis to the examiners in person, as well as to their supervisor and someone who is called the non-assessing chair. And that's what you and I want to talk about, our roles as non-assessing chair. I've been privileged and opportune to be a non-assessing chair. It was a very interesting journey for me, and I was glad to go through that. And that's why I believe I can share this with you. And please feel free to ask questions at any point so we can talk. Intentionally, I did this in form of having a note, as though it's a note. So I'll just speak through this to the notes, speak to the notes. And the reason behind this is so at the end of the day, I can share this slide with the research office and they can disseminate to all attendees. Maybe a statement or two here may help you. I decided to start by saying, please take note of the following. If you will be a non-assessing chair, take note of the following: that as a non-assessing chair, you're not the judge, but coordinator of the judges. I intentionally use this expression. You're not the judge, but you are the coordinator of the judges. The judges are there, and the judges are usually three of them. So it's a panel of judges. They form what we'll describe as the assessing committee or assessment committee, and these are the assessors or the examiners. So if you have supervised PhD before, you know that for PhD you always submit 4 names, 4 nominees who will be examiners, and then the institution will send to 3 of them, the first 3, and there's one alternate who is always on standby just in case anything goes wrong or one of the 3 declines the offer. So by and large, the thesis will be examined by 3 people. Usually, we expect that there'll be 2 locals and 1 international. Now, these 3 people are the people who form the assessment committee. And during the Viva session, they are expected to be there. They're expected to be in the room. They're expected to be part of the Viva. In fact, the Viva cannot hold without them. So the role of the non-assessing chair is as important as, or the presence rather, of the non-assessing chair is as important as the presence of the assessment committee. I know what will be going through your mind now. Oh, there are 3 of them. What if one of them chooses not to show up? Or what if 2 don't show up? What if all 3 don't show up? Well, we'll talk about that now, and I would talk about speak to it now because I want you to prepare your mind when working towards becoming a non-assessing chair. When preparing towards becoming a non-assessing chair, that these are possibilities that you may encounter. So, and I'll give you my own experience, and from maybe from the lapses that I experienced too when I chaired, when I was a non-assessing chair in one of the sessions. Maybe the lapses, you can learn from the lapses as well and use that as a guide. Now, out of the three, um, if one refuses to show up and two show up, it's still a good one. You can still proceed with the two. However, you don't have that power to do so. You don't have the power to do so. And that's why the HR is always involved. I didn't mention earlier, there's always one person too from the HR who will be the scribe. So he's the scribe, the secretary for the VIVA session. He will be the one taking notes where and when necessary. He's like the eyes of the faculty in that session. So if there are two of them pitching, two of the examiners pitching for the VIVA, you can't just take the decision on your own to say, let's proceed. The representative from the faculty will be there to decide and make that agreement or decision with you. And if you choose to proceed, then it's fine. It will be good. Please take note. It will be very good if out of the three, two pitch up and one of the two is international and one is local. It will be, for me, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, please, it will be very good in the sense that you will not just have only local opinions. You have both local and international. It makes it juicy. That's if ever only two will pitch up. But then the best option is having all three of them pitch up, come during the Viva. And that's why I think, as a non-assessing chair, when you get the different the information and the invites, and you've accepted the invites, if it's possible, do your own background work. And one of the things you can do for your own background work is send a message or send messages to the assessment committee. Send them emails because you have their information as part of the documents that will be sent to you. Send them emails and see if they are comfortable with those dates, though it is not your job. This I must put this disclaimer out there. It's not your duty to do so. It's a duty of the faculty representative. Okay. However, to make your work easy, preparing for the big day, which is the Viva session, I would suggest send an email or emails, or if you have the phone numbers and you wish to call them by phone, please do. You won't be going against the protocol. Send them emails or messages to say, this is the date, this is the time, especially for international assessors. If it's possible, give them the equivalent time of their own session, the equivalent time to the timing of the local time here, to be sure that they are okay with it. And if they are not, if they send you a message to say they are not okay with it or they won't be able to, if they do that, please contact the faculty representative immediately so they can reschedule. Now, like I said earlier, I would emphasize it again. It is not your duty to reach out to them. However, because you look forward to having a similar session, I suggest if you can reach out to them, please do. It's not against the law. It's not against the rule. You can reach out to them. You're not breaking any law or protocol, and tell them, oh, this is the idea. Is this okay? If it's possible, encourage them to show up 5 minutes to the time if they will. Remember, they are also busy people as well. So that would be a good thing. For me, from the day you are appointed and you accept the offer and the documents are sent to you, for me, your job has begun. Yes, it may be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even a month to that time, but I believe for me, your job has begun because it's you don't want to get to the session on that day and everything seems haphazard. You want everything to go seamlessly. Good. So the best you can do is on your own part, begin your own preparation, by reaching out to the necessary people where possible. Secondly, um, you may wish to also reach out to the supervisor if you want, but that's up to you. But I don't think it's really necessary for me to reach out to the supervisor because by and large, the supervisor knows he has no choice than to come. So for me, you can forget about that. The most important people that I think you should reach out to will be this assessment committee. And of course, I've explained why, because they will be the ones to decide on that day. You don't have, you can't decide what will happen. All right. So for this session, I decided to split this into three parts, which is the pre-viva, the viva, and the post-viva. I've already begun um, some comments with regards to the issue of the pre-viva. And then that leads me to the next point I want to make, which is engage and familiarize yourself with the document of the candidates. And I'll explain why I am opting for this, and which is one of the things I did. Is when you engage with the document of the candidates via prior to the Viva, you may come across some errors that the faculty committee probably might have not considered or seen when they discuss or when they send you the documents. For instance, when I was to chair one of the sessions, I engaged the documents prior to the day. So good enough, it was days before the session, and I discovered that the initials of the candidates that I had on the document sent to me by the faculty or faculty rep was different from what was stated in the team's invites and so on. So I realized that the faculty had a different initial. So I had to contact the faculty rep to say, please look into this again and let's be sure we're on the same page. And it was good. Eventually they found out and we made the necessary correction. Now that's one. Two, I also realized that an error was made in the sense that a particular report of one of the assessors was sent twice in different names of a particular folder, of two different folders. So it was a folder containing different reports or feedback, if you want to call it, of three different assessors. Unfortunately, the name of the name on the three different reports were three different names. However, two of the reports were the same from one person. So imagine if I had not engaged with that document and I just decided to engage with it on the final day, which would have been it would have been really, really disastrous. So immediately I contacted the faculty rep and they changed it and gave me the correct thing. So it was good for me to have engaged with the document. So engage with the document, familiarize yourself with the document. Also try to familiarize yourself, not necessarily knowing the content of the student's work. It's not your job. If you have the time to read through, oh, beautiful. But if not, it's not, in my opinion, it's not 100% your duty there because you are not giving any feedback. And then you're also not making any judgment there. The people to make the judgment have engaged with the document and they decided. So even if you look through the document and you come across various errors that you want to say, no, this document is rubbish. It's not worth it. Believe me, your decision there may not count, may not even hold waters. If the three examiners say, oh, award the degree, you can only probably recommend or suggest to the faculty to say, please consider this again. I don't think this is worth it. You may only do that. But the three people who have the final say when it comes to the documents or the assessing the thesis are the three examiners. All right. So that's one of the things I would suggest you do. Familiarize yourself with the documents of the candidates. And when we talk about document of the candidate, at some point in this presentation, I will share with you some of the three different things that were shared with me, at least three of the documents that were shared that you may look at. So there's one which is the form that gives the general information about the thesis, the assessors, their names, and so on. Then there's another form which is the reports, which should be the reports that you would send back to the faculty eventually after the Viva. Okay, we'll look at that a little. And then there's also what is called the scripts. So our Faculty of Education, decided to come up with the scripts to say, okay, these scripts will guide. And in my opinion, I'll take the script as a guide, not necessarily for you to read through, because if you have to start reading through the script, it may not flow as you expect. So the best you can do is try to familiarize yourself with the script and use it as a guide. Even if eventually you choose to read through the script, which is also allowed, because you are familiar with the script already prior to that time, it will flow seamlessly. It will be a good one, a good read for you. Otherwise, if you get there and you start reading through, it may become too obvious that you are reading, and you may not be comfortable with it. Personally, I may not be comfortable with such things. So I prefer to familiarize myself with the script, engage with it, and then use it as a guide rather than just hold on to it and read through as though I was just reading. The way they read in primary school, they tell someone come and read in class, and then you start. You're prone to errors there. All right. Then the next thing, still talking about the pre-Viva, before the Viva session, what you can do is, which is what I did, and I think it worked well for me. That's why I can share the experience here. Possibly populate some relevant sessions of the Viva reports. So you have that form sent to you. If it's possible, populate it. Try to populate that form. Just see how you can use the form to you can fill in certain areas. For example, the form indicates that there's a place for you to put the name of the candidates, the name of the supervisor, the name of the three examiners, their details as well, their institutions, and also it gives you opportunity or a slot to infuse the decisions made by the examiners. Okay, so please, where possible, try to complete that form to a large extent before the day of the Viva. Two things will happen there, or two reasons why I suggest you do that is, number one, it's while you're trying to complete that form, you're also invariably familiarizing yourself with the entire information needed for the Viva. So it gives you information about the candidates and the supervisor, as well as information about the examiners, all three examiners, and most importantly, their decision. So usually I've got four possible outcomes when a thesis is examined. So you find out of all three examiners what were their decisions when they examined the thesis, and that would help me go back, allow me go back a little again to the reason behind the Viva. And maybe as supervisors here, it will be you'll be able to help your students, your PhD, your doctoral students, to make them calm a little, because this noise about Viva sometimes is like is killing our students. Some of them are already scared before when they hear the issue of Viva. They are scared that, oh, I thought I'll be done after submitting my thesis. What's this thing again? So one of the things I've realized, and I think this could also help you, you could talk to them as well, is that the Viva is not a sport or a time to kill them. Nobody goes in there with a knife or a gun. No, it's just for them to relax and speak to the examiners. And possibly, sometimes uh, uh, um, written words differ from spoken words. Sometimes it's possible that your doctoral student has written something that the examiners seem not to understand. When they come into the Viva session and they explain verbally, it may make a whole lot of sense. So it's possible for an examiner to have made a decision to say, oh, um, this candidate needs to resubmit this thesis to me for re-examine, for me to re-examine again for examination. And then you get into the Viva, and the candidate will present the whole thing, and the examiner would still need to say, "Oh no, I think I was wrong when I made that decision, because now the candidate has explained what it means. I understand better. For this reason, I'm changing my decision to accept it subject to the supervisor's approval." So things like that can happen, and it's also possible that a, a an examiner says, "Oh, I accept this thesis subject to the supervisor's approval of certain sessions that needs to be corrected." So he's made his comment, he's written out his comment and sent it down. And by the time the student does the presentation during the Viva, he or she realizes that no, that decision was wrong. I should accept it the way the student wrote it because I understand better now. So maybe this could help students relax a little because sometimes they are usually very anxious. And can I say this as well? Please, as a non-assessing chair, I think you will be helping the students if you try to make the whole thing not look too serious. I know academics are always very serious, and when we get into the room, we also want to show that we are serious about the whole thing. Yes, of course, I could be very, very serious. However, I missed my seriousness. I could try to say one or two things to help calm the nerves of the candidates who may be looking very anxious at that point. And when they are so anxious, believe me, there are things they will say that will be off. We know what these things look like. We know. Even when we go for presentation or conference presentations, we know what we encounter. Professors are also sometimes on the hot seat when they go for conferences. It's just unfortunate that sometimes when we come to presentations like that, like maybe being a non-assessing chair, we don't want such things to show that we are ever anxious. We probably want to make it look like we have never been anxious and we can never be anxious. No, that so I think one of the things we can do here is find a way of making sure that we help the candidates calm a little, get relaxed, and do their presentation. Okay, and then of course I've talked about this uh, point, familiarizing yourself with the scripts. Uh, that's important as well. So still that's on the pre-viva. So what happens as a non-assessing chair um, on the day of the viva? So the viva itself. So we've talked about the pre-viva, and I did mention that under the pre-viva, there are certain things you can do. One, contact the assessment committee, which always comprise three people, the three different examiners, two locals and one international, depending on the people. Anyway, I know UJ would always want to use two local and one international. But then, of course, I don't have that right to decide that. It can change. But the good thing is, as a non-assessing chair, if you can contact the three of them prior to that time, it will be good, just to make sure you are all on the same page regarding the timing. Okay. And then that they also have the link and they are ready to join the meeting on that day and time. Just in case one of them is saying, I won't be available, and you are sure of the other two, then you can know you can proceed. Otherwise, if on the day of the session of the Viva itself, all three choose not to show up or two decide not to show up, definitely you would have to cancel. That session will have to be canceled or postponed to a later date, regardless whether the supervisor is available or the candidate is available. Okay, so the best is contact them to be sure that at least two of them, and I did mention most importantly, if it could be one local and one international, that would be good. Okay, but where there are two locals, you may need to contact the faculty, your faculty representative, to find out if that would also hold water, if it would be good to go with that or not. I am not talking about having where we cases or scenarios where we have two international examiners and one local examiner. Um, I believe in such cases, if ever such a thing happens, then it'd be good to have one of the two international examiners and of course the only local be a part of it. But very important if all three of them are available. So please see what you can do in making sure that you reach out to them where possible. And where they say they won't be available, of course, meet the faculty rep and decide what you want to do. I also talked about the issue of filling the form, completing the form prior to that day. So part of the form, not all, because there are sessions you cannot complete until the VIVA takes place. So complete certain sessions of the form just to, it will save you time as well. It will save you time after the VIVA because you won't need to populate those things again. You just finish one or two areas and you are done. And you submit the form, possibly the same day. You send it back to the faculty. All right. Now, when it comes to the VIVA itself, um, there are three different parts of the VIVA, three different parts. And intentionally here, I said stages. I use stages. I said 4 stages. Please take notes. 4 stages, 3 parts. And as soon as I'm done with these things, I will show you some documents that, of course, speak to all things I've been saying, and I'll still say. So 4 stages, 3 parts. Okay, I intentionally used 4 stages. And the first stage is you introducing yourself and reading through the script to the assessment committee, who are the examiners. So now this is the day of the VIVA. You are in the room now. If I were you as the non-assessing chair, don't trouble yourself with admitting people. Leave that duty, leave the job to the faculty representative who will be the scribe or the secretary for that meeting or that sitting. So allow him do that. Let him invite people and admit them when. You just tell him when you want him to admit whoever he wants to admit at any point. So that will ease your burden. The first thing you do is you would have all 3 examiners in the room. At this point, you don't have the supervisor and you don't have the candidate in the room. You only have the 3 examiners plus the secretary and yourself, making 5. So 5 people will be in the room. Your focus will be on the 3 examiners. So read through, introduce yourself, and read through the scripts to the examiners. The reason why you are reading the script, and if you are very familiar with what the scripts entails, which is one of the things I said earlier, familiarize yourself with it. Once you are familiar with it, you don't need to read through them. You just need to tell them, okay, this is what the whole thing entails. All right. So maybe if you have been doing it over time and you are now used to it, you just know what it is like, then go ahead. But if not, then the best is read through it to the examiners and let them know what it comprises or entails. Now, the script itself will indicate to you that there are 3 parts. And so let the examiners know what the 3 different parts entail. And then that leads me to stage 2. Okay. And that stage 2 is actually the part 1 of what the script indicates about the VIVA proceeding. So for the part 1, as a non-assessing chair, you meet with the assessment committee before you let the supervisor in and explain to them what you will be doing in that session. Discuss with the non-assessment committee, with the assessment committee, that is the examiners, and tell them, for example, the candidate has 2 options. Number 1, he can choose to prepare a slide, PowerPoint presentation like this, to say this is what he wants to use to discuss or present his thesis, maybe in 5, maximum 10 minutes. He can choose to say he wants to jot some things on a piece of paper and speak to those jottings, not a PowerPoint presentation. So you keep the examiners abreast of this so that when they see the candidates doing certain things, they understand why. You also inform them as part of the stage 2, which is the part 1 of the VIVA proceeding, also inform them that they will have room or time to ask questions. Now, going by the design from the Faculty of Education, which I believe applies to all faculties in UJ, that particular session should last 30 minutes. When I say the particular session, I mean from the point where the candidate is allowed into the room as well as the supervisor. It should last about 30 minutes. So the candidate has got between 5 to 10 minutes to do a summary of his entire thesis. And the assessment committee, who comprise the 3 examiners, have got between 20 to 25 minutes to ask questions. Now, these are the things you want to explain to the assessment committee as a non-assessing chair. You also want to make them know that the supervisor is just an observer, the same way the non-assessing chair is an observer and a coordinator of the entire process. So the supervisor has got nothing to share or say. The only time probably the supervisor needs to speak is to probably greet the examiners and then appreciate them. He has nothing, no input at all regarding the work. So these are some of the things you want to share with the assessment committee. Okay, please feel free, if you have questions, feel free to ask your questions. Now, once you're done with that, the part 2, which is the stage 3, like I indicated here, the part 2 of the VIVA itself is you invite the candidates in. Now, if this were to be something done physically in person, at this point, the candidate and the supervisor should be seated somewhere in the lobby, in one of the rooms, and you invite them in person. But then, since it's virtual, at this point, you allow the secretary, or the scribe, if you remember, I talked about the secretary, who is actually the representative of the faculty. You allow the candidates to admit the candidate and the supervisor into the virtual room. Now, when the candidate and supervisor come in, as a non-assessing chair, you also inform them. Yes, they should be aware. However, you pretend not to know that they are aware. Inform them again that the candidate has got 5 to 10 minutes to present. And of course, he's free to use a PowerPoint presentation mode or general just jottings he has made, whichever one that works best for him. You also inform the supervisor and the candidate that the supervisor is just an observer. He has no inputs or nothing to contribute to the study. Okay. You also inform the candidate that the reason is just for him to present his work, and we want to be sure that he is the owner of the work. Now, because it's a virtual, you may have it as a virtual presentation. This is one thing I want to emphasize. And I'm emphasizing this because I had a similar experience when I was chairing one of the sessions as a non-assessing chair. I always want, at least for a few minutes, the candidates to switch on their videos, because you may come to a point where, due to network bandwidth issues, they may not be able to share their videos. At least switch on their cameras and then have it as a video call or meeting. I want to, first of all, at least for a few minutes, they must show their faces. Let's see their faces. Let's know the faces behind the names. It's okay, this is the person. The supervisor as well should confirm that, yes, that's the person he or she has supervised in the last 1, 2, 3 years, depending on the number of years the study took. Okay, once you confirm that, if the candidate can continue the presentation with the camera on, oh, beautiful. But just in case, you never can tell, the issue of network, like I encountered that, the same challenge as well. Just in case you observe that, okay, the network is not friendly at the point, and the camera with the camera on is consuming more bandwidth and not allowing the candidate, not allowing free flow of communication, then I believe as a non-assessing chair, you have the prerogative to ask the, the candidate to switch off his camera and continue the presentation. Of course, at that point, you've been able to establish something or two things that the person you've been able to establish the person speaking, that he is the candidate, you know the voice as well, and the supervisor has established that yes, that's the person as well. And then uh, subsequently, when you hear the voice, you know that this is the same person speaking. The reason is with the advancement in technology these days, you never can tell. So we don't get to assess the wrong person, believing that we're actually assessing whoever has written the thesis. That's why I personally would want a case where, at least, if not all through the time of the presentation, there should be a time where the camera is on and we know who is speaking. And I just before I go on to stage 4, which is the part 3 of the VIVA process itself or proceeding, the issue of recording. I know in my faculty of education, we once had that discussion when this was discussed. The issue of the Viva was discussed, and there were these factions of should the session be recorded or not. There was that. Personally, I would suggest, if it's possible, because the candidate is not supposed to know certain things at some points. Okay, so my take would be that when the candidate begins to present, do his presentation, it can be recorded so that the candidate can have that if he wants it. He can access it later on if he or she wants to access that. Just okay, let me know how well I did. Fine. But there are certain areas or certain sessions of the Viva that the candidate should not have access to. However, where possible as well, that's why you need the faculty rep. You need to agree on those things with the faculty rep, who is the secretary there. For instance, where when we come to part 3, that's when you find out that the candidate does not really need to know whatever has gone, whatever has happened in that room after he's been asked to leave the room. So you want to find out, do you need to record that session or not? Yet it is also important to record it just in case the faculty higher degrees may decide to say, okay, let's go back and listen to the record to know what the examiner said. So I'll leave that to you and the faculty representative to decide when you should record and when you should stop each record. And of course, if the student is asking for, if the candidate is asking for access to the record, you also know how to possibly edit it to say, okay, this is what should be given to the candidate. He or she must not access from this point to this point. I'll leave that to you and the faculty representative to decide that, or maybe your faculty can decide how to go about that. Because I know it's also a problematic. It could be problematic at some point if one is not careful. Okay, but if I had the authority to decide, I would conclude that from the beginning to the end, it shouldn't be recorded. That will be my conclusion. That from the beginning to the end, it shouldn't be recorded. It should be left like that. That's just my own opinion. My own opinion. Of course, this is just a personal, very subjective now. So I can't put that out there. But I'm just saying that this is just my own opinion. And of course, I'm entitled to my opinion. Okay. Now, after the committee has the candidate has been allowed in together with the supervisor. The candidate does a presentation for 5 to 10 minutes, and the committee, the assessment committee, guided by the non-assessing chair, ask questions. Their questions must revolve around the documents they received and the presentation the candidate has done. The non-assessing chair is not allowed to ask questions. He or she is not allowed to even refine questions. You only observe. Allow, so the show at that point belongs to the assessment committee members and the candidates. The supervisor is just an onlooker or an observer. I've seen an instance where the candidate was asked a question and he was answering something different. I felt, no, this candidate didn't get the question. As a non-assessing chair, I felt that way. I know he didn't get the question. He's not answering what the examiner asked. But of course, as a non-assessing chair, my duty at that point was just to observe. So I had to keep that to myself and remain quiet, leaving the candidate to impress the assessment committee. I guess the supervisor might have felt the same way as well, but then it wasn't in his place to ask or refine the question or modify. So he had to keep quiet and observe. It was left for the candidates to impress or satisfy um, the examiners, all three of them. Now, shortly after the presentation and the examiners asked their questions and the candidate has answered the question, whether to their satisfaction or not, once you have ascertained that the examiners have concluded their questions and the candidate has concluded his response, both the candidate and the supervisor will be asked to leave the room. They both will be asked to leave the room. So as a non-assessing chair, at this point, you ask them to excuse you and the assessment committee. However, you ask the supervisor to remain at the lobby. The candidate is to go home. Okay? And he or she is done with his or her own parts of the deal. But the supervisor is to wait because he'll be admitted into the room again after the conversation or discussion between the non-assessing chair and the assessment committee. And that brings us to the part 3, which is stage 4. Yeah. So for the part 3 or the stage 4, if you want to put it as stage 4, this is where the 3 different assessors who make up the assessment committee or examiners, if you want to call them as that, this is where they discuss with the chair. So the non-assessing chair, which is you at this point, will guide that conversation. You want to ask all 3 of them their decisions. And of course, all 3 of them are entitled to their different decisions. Now, this is why it is important that you have at least 2 out of the 3 assessment committee members. So just imagine you have only one. Can you decide that? That won't form a quorum. So whatever decision is taken there can be faulted. That's why it won't work. Now, imagine you have 2, at least 2 out of 3. That goes a long way. Now, this is why you hear me say it's good and interesting if you can have one international and one local. The reason is, imagine you have just 2 locals and no international. And maybe after you decide, you'll have this discussion at the part 3, and you agree to say, let's award the degree. You consent that everything is in order, the thesis should be approved. And maybe 1 week or 2 weeks later, or maybe years later, the international examiner comes up to say, I'm surprised that my decision was that the candidates should send back the thesis for me to re-examine. I didn't get that. And I'm surprised I can see online now that UG has awarded the degree. It can make a case out of it. More so because he's an international examiner. Because at this point, he's looking at the study from an international level, using the lens of the global world. So the 2 people who have decided or concluded to say accept, we're just looking at it from a local perspective. And of course, this is one One of the candidate examiners for thesis, for a PhD thesis, is always an international examiner. So when it comes to VIVA, my take is please do everything possible just to avoid troubles in future. Do everything possible to make sure that at least one international examiner and one local examiner is involved. That way, the local examiner, one can conclude that the local examiner has spoken for the two local examiners that were invited to examine the thesis, whereas the international examiner has represented the international world. That's how I see it anyway. Okay, but that's how I feel as a non-assessing chair. If it's possible to contact them prior to this time and maybe possibly make them see reasons why they should be there and make them know that their presence there will be very important and you are ready to ask them to postpone the session if they would not be available to a more convenient time. So maybe this will also speak to us, every one of us as supervisors. So from the point of uh, um, nominating our examiners, we should be thinking beyond that, the examination of the thesis to say, will this person be available for a VIVA after examining the thesis? Or possibly when we write to them to say, oh, I'm nominating you as an examiner, part of the duty is you examine the thesis and you would also be available. You should be ready to attend a VIVA, an oral defense. So I think that will also make them know what they are signing or the deal they are coming to consenting to before they even approve to say, okay, go ahead and nominate me as an examiner. Okay. All right, back to stage 4, which is part 3. The non-assessing chair will discuss with the 3 different examiners who make up the assessment committee. Now, you tell them what or rather you ask them the question what their decision is currently. Remember that prior to this time, they've had a decision, which is what they wrote down and sent as their final report when they, prior to the VIVA, they've made their decisions. Now, here they've listened to the candidates. The candidate at this point is expected to have presented something that must have had the infusion of the comments, the written comments of the examiners. So at this point, you, as a non-assessing chair, you ask the examiners if they are okay with the presentation. If, in their opinion, they feel that the work belongs to this candidate, the originality of the work is not questionable. If it is questionable, then of course there are other things to discuss here. If it's not questionable, thumbs up to the candidates, and it makes your work easy as non-assessing chair. That box is ticked. Then you also ask them if, in their opinion, the candidate has effected all their suggestions, their written suggestions, if there is need for such, and if they are impressed and okay with it. If they are okay with it, oh, good for you. It makes your work easy. Thumbs up to you. And then you also ask them again, maybe the final question will be what their final decision will be now. So they've had a previous decision, which was written. Now you want to hear their current decision, which will be verbal. Allow me to share with you the 4 different outcomes. And then I'll use this to discuss both their written and their oral decisions after the VIVA. So prior and after. Now, UJ has got 4 options. And every examiner who examines a thesis, a doctoral thesis, is supposed to select one out of these 4 options. The first option is approve the thesis with or without minor corrections to be made to the satisfaction of the supervisor. With or without minor corrections to be made to the satisfaction of the supervisor. That's one possible outcome. Number two, approve the thesis provisionally, but the candidate has to make non-substantive corrections and improvements to the thesis to the satisfaction of the supervisor. So the first one, approve, almost approve the way it is, or maybe with minor correction. Two, approve it provisionally, subject to certain corrections again that will be made by the candidate to the satisfaction of the supervisor. One and two is quite interesting. Now, please take notes that an examiner can go into the VIVA. Prior to the VIVA, he has made a decision to say, no, my decision is number one, approve the thesis with or without minor correction. And suddenly after the VIVA, he can change his mind to say, no, some things I thought and I was thinking and approved should be changed. So his decision can change to number two, approve the thesis provisionally. And of course, this is not a good one. His decision can also change to number three, recommend substantial amendment to the thesis in the light of deficiencies identified in my narrative report and propose that the revised version be submitted to me for reassessment. Students don't always want to hear this, okay? They prefer one and two. And the worst of them all is number three, reject the thesis. In which case, no assessment is recommended or considered. Now, I like us to note that, of course, all these decisions are subjective, depending on the lens with which the examiners examine the thesis. However, where out of the three examiners, two are saying accept or approve, and one is saying reject, of course, this is where the faculty may end up using the alternates. And faculty higher degrees can come up to make some other decisions eventually. Let's not go into that. It doesn't really concern us for now. Let's look at this generally. So now this is where you're discussing as a non-assessing chair, stage 4, which is the third, which is the part 3. Now, at this point, you're deciding with the examiners to say, should we approve? Now, if eventually, prior to the VIVA, the examiners have said, our decision is point 2, approve provisionally. And now after the VIVA, they can tell that no, the candidate has effected the corrections and they are okay with it. Everything seems so nice. Then they go to point 1 to say approve the thesis. It makes your work easy as a non-assessing chair. Instantly, you recommend, you appreciate them, and you can end the whole thing. Of course, once again, at this point, the supervisor is not there because he doesn't have the power to influence anything. So it is just you as a non-assessing chair and the 3 doctoral assessors or examiners and the faculty rep, who is the scribe there, okay? It's also possible that the examiners will say, we have approved the thesis before, but now our decision is changing. Recommend with substantial amendments. Oh, this time around, it's making your work more difficult because there's more work for the candidates to do. Okay. Now let's leave that. Let's come to another critical area. Out of the 3 examiners, the 3 people who form the assessment committee, where 2 of them agree with point 1 and the last person disagrees, there's an issue. However, as a non-assessing chair, you don't have the rights to change anything. Your duty is take their decision the way it is and report the whole thing to the faculty. This is where the faculty higher degrees will take it up and decide for themselves what's next. If they need you to comment or they need you to suggest, then they can invite you. But your duty and your job as a non-assessing chair will be to take the decision, include it in your report, and submit that. And your work is done there. You don't have the right to start asking the examiner, can you change this? Can you change that? Can you do this? No, it's not your duty. Just allow them make their decision there and tell you what their decision is, and you document their decision. Of course, with the help of the scribe who will be there in the room as well. Once they are done with their decisions, and please, this whole part, it can be complicated. So please feel free to ask questions. I think it may be good for me to take specific questions and address specific questions. That may help me because really it can be complicated at some points. But it's not as difficult as maybe I'm sounding now, because your duty as a non-assessing chair will be, what have they decided? Take their reports and send it to the faculty higher degree. That's your job, and it ends there. Okay. Now, once they are done with the decision they are making here, you invite the supervisor one more time. So the supervisor is invited into the room, and this is where, as a non-assessing chair, you inform the supervisor in the room there, in the presence of the assessment committee, the decision or decisions. So if the decision is, oh, all three examiners have approved the thesis, congratulate the supervisor immediately right there. If not, tell the supervisor in the presence of the assessment committee and the scribe that, okay, one out of the three examiners have decided that it should be approved. The other fellow is saying it should be approved subject to the supervisor's uh, um, approval of certain areas. And the third one is saying it should be sent back. He's still insisting that the work should be sent back. So give those decisions to the supervisor to say, this is what the examiners have said, not necessarily mentioning who is saying what. So you don't have to start telling the supervisor, oh, examiner A has said this, examiner B has said this, examiner D has said. No, you don't need to do that. Just tell the supervisor, this is what the examiners have said. And if all three of them are saying our decision is point one, which is approved with or without minor corrections, then good enough. Congratulate the supervisor there and tell him all three examiners have decided on point one. Where there is a disparity, tell the supervisor as well that, oh, there's a disparity here. Two have said point one, but the third one is saying point two, or the other way around, or depending on what the decision is. Then you also inform the supervisor there at the point that henceforth you would then proceed to pass the reports to the faculty higher degrees, who will reach out to the supervisor in due course and inform him or her of their decision, which will then be reported to the candidate as well. But of course, where all three examiners approve, then congratulations will be in order to say, oh, congratulations, all three have approved, and then the faculty higher degrees will get back to the supervisor. On that note, you can then close the meeting. Appreciate the assessment committee, appreciate the supervisor, and close the meeting there. However, please take note that you can have as well give room for the scribe, the secretary, or the faculty representative to speak if he or she has got something to say. Okay, so his duty there majorly is to admit people into the room and write what happens in the report, do his own reports that will be sent to the faculty. But at this point, you can give him or her the opportunity to speak if he or she has got something to say. Where he or she has got nothing to say, oh, of course, close the meeting there, and that'll be the end. Now, I said note the following possibilities. I've tried to explain this earlier. that all examiners can unanimously agree on one option, any of the four options. And of course, if they all agree on the last option, which is reject, then of course that's failure, outright failure for the candidates. If it's the third option, that means that the candidate will have to rewrite the thesis, do substantive correction, and send back to them. If it's the second option, it means that the candidate will have to just go through the corrections, effect the corrections, and send to the supervisor for final approval, which is, in my opinion, too, is somewhat good. It's as good as point one. As long as supervisor, of course, every supervisor would want their supervisee to succeed. Then if it is point one, oh, good enough. It means that the candidate has got little or nothing else to do there. The thesis is just intact. And of course, I've mentioned this before, that where there are disparities, then the different options are reported as recommendations to the faculty higher degrees for their final decision. Okay, then I've also mentioned the issue of the secretary who should be allowed to speak at some point. On this note, um, I believe that I've touched the vital issues regarding the VIVA itself. So remember I said we've got the pre-VIVA stage, the VIVA stage, and the post-VIVA stage. Now we are done with the pre-VIVA, we are done with the VIVA itself. For the pre-VIVA, I said check the documents, familiarize yourself, know what you're doing there and how you want to go about it. Try to familiarize yourself with the script. For the VIVA itself, I said remember that to explain that there are three parts there, four stages, three parts, and go through the different stages with and the different parts with the examiners. Let the candidate come in with the supervisor when he's supposed to come in. Let the candidate present a 5 to 10 minutes presentation. Let the examiners ask questions and the candidate respond. That should take about 30 minutes. Okay. And then let the candidate and the supervisor leave the room while the non-assessing chair and the examiners, they discuss to say, okay, what is the final decision from each of the examiners? Remember, it is each of the examiners, not all three of them. So each of them will come up with their decision. And once they come up with their decision, invite the candidates, the supervisor rather, only the supervisor in again, admit him into the room again, and inform him of the decision of the examiners. If it's just one decision, they have all agreed on one thing, let him know. If there are different decisions which cannot exceed three, then of course inform him, because there are three examiners there, they can't give more than three decisions. So they must all take one. Inform him or her as well. And then the final stage, which is the post-VIVA stage. So after you've closed the VIVA proceeding, you've ended everything, this is where you go back to your form. So you go back to your form again. Remember I said at the pre-VIVA stage, you fill some part of the form. So at the post-VIVA stage, you come to your form now and you complete the form to say this is what the examiners have said. Complete the form and send the form to the faculty representative. For Faculty of Education, this is the email there, edupostgrad@uj.ac.za. I don't know about other faculties, but of course you have the different faculties have got this. And then you send it to the faculty as well as the supervisor. So the supervisor will be, it's like a written communication. Not this is the same thing that has been said at the oral defense. So you've told him verbally, but now you are doing it in a written form. So you send the email as well to the supervisor, who will then communicate the decision to the candidates. Now, where there is still need for the faculty higher degree to probably come in, so in case there are disparities in the decisions of the examiners, the supervisor is aware and should inform the candidate, okay, we are waiting for the faculty higher degrees to come up with the final decision, because he won't have the final decision to make, but they will have the final decision to make there. And this is where the job of the non-assessing chair ends. And then I stated here, however, please note that there may be need for further consultation where there are disparities in the recommendations of the assessment committee. the faculty higher degree committee may need your input somewhere. They may, and I want to emphasize may, but your job ends here outrightly, where you send an email to the faculty as well as the supervisor. On this note, thank you very much. Allow me just share with you part of the script I was trying to say earlier. I was trying to explain to you or show you. So let me stop sharing, then we share again. I'll just show you some of the scripts, what they look like. Okay, this is just an example for one of for the session I chaired. Okay. Now, this, I'm sure as supervisors, we are familiar with this. Okay. But maybe I should start with the scripts. Now, this is the scripts. Okay. You may see some yellow highlights. I did that myself. So this was what I was doing prior to the VIVA. So if I were you, I would do this, complete certain things here. So this part will come like this without any name. You are the one who will infuse the name. That's what happens there. So the faculty gave these scripts without the names, and I infused it to make it easy for myself when I read through. So when you are at the pre-viva stage, I would suggest that you infuse the names, complete the different spaces, put the necessary information there to help you read through seamlessly as you proceed. Then you also notice somewhere here, the names of the examiners are also here. But ordinarily, when this form came from the faculty, it was without names and institution. And I was the one who included the names and the institutions. So just take note of it. Then this is what I meant when I said part one. Yeah, so you read through the whole thing, the different parts, read the assessment committee. This is part two as well. Okay, and this is part three. So the non-assessment, the assessment committee are familiar with these different parts because you read through with them. Once you are done with the reading through the different parts with them, you tell them that, okay, we move on to the first parts, let the candidate in, and then which is part two there, and then you move on to part three, which is where they now have the final decisions to make. And of course, you are familiar with these four decisions or options I stated here. Okay, it's just the same thing that we get that UJ sends to us that we're all familiar with as supervisors. Then they make their decisions. Now, this is what the script looks like. I can as well send the script to you if you want at any point. Now, this is what the report looks like. As a non-assessing chair, this is the reports you'll be writing and sending to the faculty. This is what the report looks like. So you see that you can actually populate these parts before the VIVA. So section A, which is the student details, you can do that before the VIVA. Section B, which is the details of the non-assessing chair, your own detail, you can put that before the VIVA. Section 3, which is the details of the panel members, that is the assessment committee, you can also do that before the VIVA. And of course, when you are doing this, it will also help you know the institution or give you some information about the assessment committee. Now, section D, you may not be able to do that because you can't come up with a decision. You only have decision made by the examiners based on the thesis, not based on the VIVA. You have that. You can look through that report and state there, okay, this is what you just know that this is what they have said, this is what they have indicated. So, of course, their decisions will be based on these 4 points, these 4 options. So, whether it is based on the thesis or the VIVA, it is still either of these 4 options. But then I would suggest take note of their decision based on the thesis, not the VIVA now, prior to the VIVA. Just take note of it, know what it looks like. Then after the VIVA, when you get to part 3 and you have discussed with the assessment committee and they have made a decision, you can then tick any of these boxes based on the decision they come up with. And then the section E, which is the supervisor's details, you can put this as well prior to the VIVA if you want. Okay. And then, of course, the student details as well, or the assessment committee details comes up here. Okay. One after the other. And this is why I said you can send them emails because you have access to their emails. You can even phone them because you have access to their phone numbers. And then the last part is not necessarily for you. It's for the faculty higher degree to decide. Now you notice that it ends here, the section G, they said where applicable. Okay, if the results are, if there's disparity of results and the faculty higher degrees decide to send to a fourth examiner, then you have to complete section G. But where there's no need for a fourth examiner, who is the alternate examiner, then of course this place remains blank. And section H is for the faculty higher degree who would decide if they were approved or not. And of course, that will be done indicating a signature from the Vice Dean Research. All right, I think, I don't know if I still have a little time. Let me just show you what this is again. And this is it. So you have this document, which is the nomination of the assessors. This is what will give you all the information you need. The supervisor's information, the assessor's information as well. So it is from here that you take the information to populate this document where you have all the information as part of your reports. On this note, I think I should pause and take questions if there are. I can respond to specific questions. I think it will also help me engage further. I don't know if there's any question in the chat. Okay. Although this was the survey. Okay. Yes, the floor is open. Yes, please go ahead. Snotty, please go ahead. I hope I got your name right. Go ahead with your question, please. Snotty, yes, you can unmute and speak. Oh, you cannot unmute. Doc, please help them out. Okay, the research office will help us here now. Doc, can you please help us? Give them access to unmute, please.
Sinoti, now you are unmute mic.
Snotty, please go ahead. You can unmute now.
Sinoti.
Catherine, like you wanted to unmute and speak before. Yes, you can unmute now, Catherine. Snotty, you can also unmute if you are ready. Untuli, please, Dr. Untuli, please, can you help Catherine to unmute as well?
Yes, Prof, I've enabled everyone's mic now. So if anyone has a question, just unmute yourself on your side and ask your question.
All right, thank you very much. So, Catherine, yes, you can unmute. Sinoti, your hand is still up, just in case you still want to ask your question, please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and
Oh,
clear.
sorry for the glitch. Yes, sorry for the glitch. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation. It was very much valuable. At the start of your presentation, you mentioned that you strongly recommend that one of the assessors or examiners should be an international uh, examiner. Just clarify, let's use the example of South Africa. What could be considered an international examiner? Someone coming from Lesotho or someone coming from USA? Or is there, it doesn't matter, as long as it's outside of South Africa, it qualifies to be an international assessor.
Oh, okay, let me explain that. Now, before you send the thesis out to examiners, remember that the faculty higher degree committee will sit and approve the recommended assessors or nominated assessors. Normally, they have a meeting, and in that meeting, you must have completed a form and sent to them, which they will look through and approve four. They need to approve four examiners. Three will be the real examiners, and one will be alternate, just in case. Now, before they approve these four examiners for a doctoral thesis, I believe that every faculty would want to see at least one international, maybe one regional, and one local. It depends. It depends. In my opinion, Lesotho may not be considered as international, but regional. Regional. It may not be considered as international. But once again, it will depend on your faculty. So, to make it easy, out of the three examiners approved by the faculty higher degrees, I would suggest ensure that during the VIVA, at least one of them should be local and the other should be international. So if maybe in your faculty, for example, Lesotho is approved to be an international examiner, then my suggestion would be, please ensure that on the day of the VIVA, the person from Lesotho is there to at least represent the international community. Though, in my opinion, I would always consider Lesotho as regional and not international. But just in case your faculty higher degree committee approves someone from Lesotho in place of international, then my take would be that do everything possible to be sure that that fellow is available for the VIVA. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, Snotty, you can go ahead now.
No, I'm done.
Okay, yeah, I'm talking about Snotty.
No, I've spoken.
Oh, okay, all right. Sorry. Yes, Catherine, please go ahead. Catherine, you wanted to speak earlier.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for your
All
very
right.
helpful presentation. Was really appreciated. I just wondered if you could share with us the 3 or 4 main slides, just so that I can save them as my backup as I head through this process for the first time. I'd appreciate that. And maybe you did at the very beginning tell us if we could find them in a folder or something, but I joined a little bit late because I was coming late from a meeting. And thank you very much.
All right. I will share the slide with Dr. Ntuli, and he's the organizer. He will share it with everyone who has attended this meeting.
Thank you so
definitely
much.
you will get it. And if by chance you don't get it early enough, please feel free to send me an email. I'll just type my email in the chat, and I'll share it with you immediately. But I believe that Dr. Ntuli will share this as prompt as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, Prof. All the presentation as well as the recording will be shared with all the participants on model communities.
Okay.
Can you tell me where model communities are? Sorry, I'm a brand new staff member, so I'm not sure where to find that. Is that in the UJ link folders?
Under ULink, you will find communities that we are enrolled in. Please do check where you receive this email for this workshop, like for example, an advert for this workshop. That is whereby you will find your model communities. If you are a staff member, you will find it under staff members community. If you're a postdoc, you'll find it under postdoc PDRF community. And if you're a student, you will find it under research and PhD student community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. Now, somebody's asking, what should be the time? Now, the entire VIVA, I mean the entire process, from the pre-VIVA, from the part 1 to the part 3, would be about 2 hours. 2 hours. And I think I should also emphasize here that as a non-assessing chair, you will be allowed to use your discretion at some points. So, for example, the student is presenting, and that's why I said 5 to 10 minutes presentation from the students. Prior to the time of inviting the students in, to the time of the student coming in and then doing the presentation, to the time of questions and answer engagement between the assessors and the students, to the time of making the final decision, having that chat with the assessors and inviting the supervisor in a second time, everything should be about 2 hours. So the entire process should be about 2 hours. That's the idea. However, this is not rocket science now. So I must state here that as a non-assessing chair, please take notes. You may find out that you may exceed 2 hours. You may. But the idea is we don't want to exceed 2 hours. Don't forget also that the assessment committee are professors and they are busy people from different parts or different parts of the world or the country. So we don't also want to keep them waiting or keep them in the room for too long. So always try to target at least a maximum of 2 hours. Then for the presentation of the students, now it's not a major presentation. Please take notes. It's not. That's why we encourage that the student can do the presentation having PowerPoint slides or jottings. It's got about 5 to 10 minutes. That's the idea. So it's like asking the student, I don't know if you've seen this competition, 3 minutes thesis. Okay. Now, in this case, now it's like 5 to 10 minutes thesis. So the student the candidate is expected to give a rundown or a summary of his or her work in about 5 to 10 minutes. Then the next major thing will be the engagement between between the assessors and the candidates. And of course, that I've said 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes you realize, like one of the a session I chaired, the candidate was still saying some things that I felt was vital, even after 10 minutes. So I had to remain quiet and calm, allow the student to dish. But when it got to a point, I had to indicate, all right, wrap it off now, maybe in 1 minute. Otherwise, you find out that because the candidate knows that he or she wants to needs to impress the assessors, the candidate may continue to speak like that. And believe me, uh, 1 hour may not be enough. So I don't subscribe to 1 hour, neither do I subscribe to 45 minutes. If the entire engagement will not take more than 2 hours, then as a non-assessing chair, you may need to check it again. How many minutes do you think would be more comfortable or convenient for the candidate to present a summary, not the entire thesis, a summary of the thesis? Okay, so I hope that helps you. That's, I think, Justice. I hope that helps. This is JL. Okay, not Justice. I don't know who JL is. All right. Okay, any other question? Any other question or comments or area that probably needs clarification? All right. Yes, if there's no question, I think I should hand over to you, Dr. Ntuli.
Thank you, Prof. Chinaza. Apologies for that. Mr. Ntuli was just standing in for me for a few minutes. But thank you for that presentation. If there's no more questions, maybe we can leave it another 30 seconds open to the attendees. And if there's no other questions, then we can close the session if everyone would be happy with that. So we just give it a few seconds, if that's fine with you.
Oh, sure, it's fine by me. Like they say in education, after a session, it's either everything has been understood or nothing was understood.
I think from their presentation, a lot was understood. Prof, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very, very insightful, very helpful. So thank you for that. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. So with that, I think we can close the session. Once again, we'd like to thank you, Prof. Chinaza, and express our appreciation as well to the students for participating. And once again, to you, Prof. Chinaza, for all of your hard work, time, and effort that has gone into this presentation. We greatly appreciate it from the RCD unit. Thank you for supporting us. And I'd also like to just make the attendees aware that there is the last session in this VIVA series, which will start at 12. So we'd be very happy if you could attend that as well. So with that, thank you all very much. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Bye.